My Apple experience has been far too easy and seamless, and that's no fun because we're tech people and we like to tinker. Enter the penguin. Linux. It's time as a tech person to tinker with something that makes me work for what I get out of my machine. What is Linux like for normal people? If you've watched my channel, you know that I have several Apple products. I'm filming this on an iPhone right now. You can see the AirPods in my ears, and you know that I have a MacBook, and you can check out my Apple Shortcuts video for MacBook and iPhone, etc. in a link in the description below if you like. The two computers that you see right here are both running variations of Linux. Actually, this one is triple booted right now between Windows 11, Pop OS, and Nobara. This computer here is running Zorin OS. Now, when I say that I'm a Linux newbie, that's not 100% accurate. In fact, the first encounter I had with Linux was on a CD of Ubuntu that came in the mail that my dad ordered on the internet. This was a live CD. This is before we had USB live boots, etc., that you could do for Linux. And we played around with it and we thought it was kind of neat. And we tucked it away if ever came the day that we got so mad at Windows that we never wanted to touch it again. See, despite the fact that I do a lot of Apple-related videos, I've always grown up using Windows. I still use Windows occasionally for gaming and a handful of applications that don't run currently on my Mac. My Linux experience then flared up again when Windows 10 came in, and there was a lot of talk about telemetry data, advertising, and even recording your keystrokes on the computer. So I yet again explored Ubuntu, and specifically the Ubuntu Studio flavor at the time. Now, the thing is, as you can tell by the fact that you're watching a video of me right now, I like content creation. Content creation has often been argued to be better and easier on Mac. I do think, as somebody who's run all of these systems now, that is somewhat overrated, and you can certainly, especially these days, easily create content on all of them. However, if you're looking for a set it and forget it setup, Mac is very easy for that. That's why I tried Ubuntu Studio. I did not find it worked for my needs, and this is going to be a recurring theme because it didn't run the specific applications that I already used and needed to use for compatibility with other people. See, the FOSS, the free and open source community of software, has a lot of fantastic software, some of which I have used on Windows and Mac just because they're already great. And come on, if you haven't played Super Tux Kart, you need to play Super Tux Kart. It will run on anything. It's a really fun sort of Mario Kart knockoff. Feels disrespectful to it and all the work that's gone into it, but it's really, really, really fun. I actually like the sports modes probably more than anything else. So here's what happened. I was curious with Zorin OS because it promised to be very Windows-like and have a lot of Windows support. Great for that category of people that want to leave Windows, be able to run some of their own software, and not have to reinvent the wheel. Zorin is a great version of this. There's going to be some people who are upset with me for recommending Zorin because it has a for-profit angle. Again, the FOSS purist community has a perspective. I'm not telling you that it's the wrong perspective, a perspective that computing and software should be free and it should be open source. They see things like Ubuntu and Canonical making money off of support and things like that. They see things like Zorin Professional, which is a paid operating system, being antithetical to that ethos. I have no problem with people making money off of software. In fact, I think it usually gives them more of an incentive to actually make me something good. The problem is when they get so big as a company that they're more beholden to shareholders. And so they do silly things like ads and telemetry and AI to just kind of make money. I'm digressing. So my experience with Zorin was actually pretty good. A bit limiting, especially for a Linux distro, but I mean, that's kind of the point. It's for people who want just their simple Windows setup. And I would have to say I would and have recommended Zorin now to people who want to get away from Windows, but don't want to get too into the weeds of like terminal and code and all these kinds of things. I would actually recommend Zorin OS too. Zorin OS, you can try the Core or Lite or whatever it's called, is the free version. And other than some like aesthetic things, I haven't really come across a lot of like limitations in terms of what it can do. If you are a person who just wants to surf the web, write emails, use browser-based apps, basic apps that you can easily get on Linux, like LibreOffice or OnlyOffice, like these office related things, and you're not doing anything crazy, like it's actually pretty smart. So it's pretty good. There's a lot of support. In fact, their Windows, I think it's called Windows Support app. It's kind of like a skin for bottles. It allows you to run some Windows applications with caveats, with catches on it. And it even has like a UI to select if it's a game that you're trying to install or another kind of software. I managed to get some like old Need for Speed games that I own running on that. I was actually pretty impressed. No issues. So that was really cool. Now, what I have on this bad boy is Windows 11, Pop! OS, and Nobara, which is quite a story in itself. So I wanted to try a gaming centric distribution because now that I do my day job on a Mac, I don't really need Windows other than for the things that Mac isn't good at, which is namely gaming. Mac has the hardware, but not great support. I'm not a hardcore gamer or anything like that. There is only a handful of games that I play. And unfortunately, one of my main games is been very frustrating to try and get to work on Linux. And I may try it now that I got no bar running again, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. And that is Star Wars Battlefront. And that is because the EA app is just the bane of my existence. I don't like that app at all. It's a launcher for EA games. I hate launchers. Getting back the old days when just an application would just a game would run. I understand why they need to do it for anti-piracy reasons. I respect that, but it is annoying. The way that Linux works for the uninitiated when it's running a Windows software, oftentimes is through something called Wine, and which is a compatibility application that sort of it doesn't emulate. I couldn't tell you the nuts and bolts. I'm sure someone can in the comments, but it allows you to run some of these Windows apps, but it has to do so in a way that is a per app, and it's a little bit more tricky when it has dependencies in other apps like the EA app, or in my case, the EA app and the Epic app at the same time, because I purchased the game through Epic, but it's an EA game because there was a deal at Epic at the time. It's this whole annoying thing to be able to launch all three of those things. Now, there are some alleged workarounds, and people have alleged, if you look on ProtonDB, which tells you some like Linux compatibility for games, you will find Star Wars Battlefront saying that people have been able to run it. So I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying I have not succeeded. It could be due to limitations with the hardware in my computer, though. Who knows? So because I wanted to do some gaming, I was originally trying to see if I could run Steam OS, and it doesn't look like that's fully a desktop thing officially yet. Anyways, the more gaming centric distros that I was able to find was Pop! OS, CachyOS, and Nobara. Nobara is apparently developed by the same guy who came up with Proton GE, Glorious Egg Roll, which allowed the Steam Deck to be able to do all of that magically seeming compatibility with Windows games that it does. It has a lot of tweaks specifically for people who are content creators and gamers. Perfect. Being able to run some of these things out of the box, you have no idea how frustrating it is as a content creator, if you're not one of them, to try and use Linux. Even just simple codecs. I remember years ago, one of the first times I was using Ubuntu Studio, and I couldn't even do so much as play a DVD without installing something extra. On Ubuntu Studio, a multimedia focused distro. Crazy. Now, that was years ago. Things have gotten a lot better in Linux land. Like, this is a good time to try. Another reason why it's a good time to try, as much as, we gripe and complain about AI is pretty good for helping you troubleshoot things. I would get errors and things like that. I would Google, I'd check Reddit, but I'd also check AI and be like, hey, this is the problem I'm having right now. And I came up with a lot of problems trying to install these distros. And in fact, I nuked my bootloader for Windows. And then it was able to help me get things back without even losing my Windows install. So things have gotten a lot better. Nobara even has a whole like wizard to kind of get you installing DaVinci Resolve on Linux, which is amazing because I've seen oddly a lot of people who said that things worked seamlessly for them trying to install DaVinci Resolve on Linux, but every distro I have tried, it's been a nightmare to try and install DaVinci Resolve. I've read so many different guides, I've watched so many YouTube videos, there's so many wacko workarounds that I've gotten to the point where I'm like, it's wrong for Blackmagic to even leave this thing up and say that they support Linux when so clearly they do not put any thought into supporting Linux because it's so hard to get running. However, Nobara even has a wizard for that. I haven't fully gone through that yet, but I am cautiously optimistic that I'll be able to get DaVinci Resolve running. Another part of the problem is that I've been trying to run a lot of these things in VMs or this thing, which has not very good hardware. It has a terrible graphics card. This is a gaming PC as much. This is a modern gaming PC, relatively modern, a couple of years old now. And so it has a lot better hardware for this kind of thing. I really wanted to try Cashy OS, which, if you're unfamiliar, is a variation on Arch Linux with a lot of gaming centric stuff, which actually is adjusted like at the kernel level to actually optimize way better for games. I was able to successfully install it multiple times, I think, except the problem was that when I did, there was no grub. There's an option to install grub. If you're unfamiliar, it's kind of like a menu that allows you to boot to multiple operating systems when you have multiple operating systems installed. There's other ones besides grub, like I think it's like system MD or boot or something like that. It's called refined, a few others. And it gives you those options to choose the one that you want. There's a lot of options on install for CachyOS, which I appreciate, which could be overwhelming for a new user, but I do appreciate it. And for some reason, it just didn't work. Now, later, I even checked the boot order in my BIOS, and I was able to still not find. I wasn't able to find it. Now, I did have another option to be able to kind of, I think it was called like PBS boot, something like that. That did list later when I got Pop OS, and I had the same problem and no grub. I was able to find it in there and get things going, and then eventually install Refind, and things are working fine now. Only not with CachyOS because I gave up and assumed that maybe it was a cache problem, and I installed Pop OS with the same problem. So now that I successfully installed Pop OS, which is a cool looking one, I love the wallpapers. I'm impressed with the wallpapers in a lot of these. I know it's such a silly thing to be impressed with, but I actually am. Same with Zorin, and each one I've tried when I like the wallpapers, I've just gone and downloaded them to use on whatever OS I end up with in the end. I had another issue on install with Cashy. After a little more research, I found that Cashy has, gets frequent updates, which is awesome if you want that bleeding edge and if you're just like the hardcore gamer that games every day, every night. But for me, I want a little more stability. I don't want to have to always tinker it with it every time I boot up to play a game. That just sounds annoying. If I'm only, going to be playing every once in a while, I switch to Nobara. I currently have Nobara and Pop OS installed on here. I'm going to get rid of Pop OS as I don't see the need for it now. And what I like about Nobara, similar to CachyOS, is you can choose the KDE Plasma desktop environment. I like it because it has a lot of customization. I don't want to go, until the cows come home on customization. But what I like is being able to have multiple workspaces. Really comes in clutch, or even better, the activities option within KDE. If you've ever used on virtual desktops on Windows or Mac, you kind of have an idea what we're talking about here, but activities is almost closer to modes or on like focus modes on like your iPhone or your Mac. Like I can have a work mode, or I could have a writing mode, a content creation mode, and a gaming mode, and I could just see just the apps for that, different wallpaper, different widgets and layout and everything. I love that kind of customization. There's a great video by, I think it's called like Juxtaposed or something like that. I'll leave a link in the description where she showed how she designed a very aesthetically pleasing minimalist UI for on KDE, and I based what I did a lot off of that. You should really check that video out. She has some cool videos. So now I have Nobara, and I'm planning to really put it through its paces. But this has been my Linux experience and some of my thoughts on Linux so far. If you have even been tangentially interested in Linux or curious about Linux, I hope that there's some insightful information for you there. I'm excited to continue my Linux journey and adventure, and I hope you guys are excited to hear about it. If you are, let me know in the comments below and what you would like to hear about my experiences coming from Mac and Windows on Linux. If there's anything specific you'd like to hear about, like what it was like doing gaming, what it was like doing content creation, etc., or maybe a particular thing you want me to try, a desktop environment, a distro, whatever. And I hope you will subscribe for more content. I talk about all things tech, whether it's Mac, Linux, Windows. Enjoy Penguin Land is what I'm going to do now, and hopefully get Nobara working, and hopefully remove Pop OS without nuking everything else. Have a great day.